On to photosynthesis. And what we're going to do with photosynthesis is not as much detail as we cover with cellular respiration. So we're going to look at photosynthesis, the big picture of what happens, where it happens, and then we're going to break it down just like we did with cellular respiration, but in not nearly as much detail. So again, just focus on my videos and rely on what I'm telling you you should know, and omit all of the names of compounds, structures, that sort of thing, other than the ones that I point out, which will be important to know. So, the big picture for photosynthesis. We're going to give you just a quick overview. Photosynthesis can be broken down into the following three distinct but connected stages. So we're looking at three stages, whereas cellular respiration we had four. And you're actually going to notice what I want you to try to do as you're learning and as I'm going through each of these stages is to try and think of the similarities between some of the things that happen during photosynthesis to some of the things that happen during cellular respiration. So the first stage is capturing light and energy. So we all know that plants need light in order to undergo the process of photosynthesis. And from that, they can make ATP and a reduced form. Remember these energy carriers? In cellular respiration, we had two carriers called NAD and FAD. In photosynthesis, similar energy carrier where they're going to carry electrons in the form of this hydrogen, and except that it's instead of NAD, it's NADPH or NADP. Okay, and this hydrogen can come off and be reattached depending on the type of reaction that's happening, just like NAD and FAD. So the first two here make up what we call the light reactions. So really, even though I'm saying three distinct stages, overall in terms of the types of reactions, I would say there's two, and I'll show you what those are. So after the light reactions are finished, we're going to use some free energy to synthesize some organic compounds from carbon dioxide. Energy in the form of ATP and this reduced form of NAD. So the two main stages. So these are sort of three descriptions of stages that happen, but if we were to name them just like we did in cellular respiration, how in cellular respiration we had four main titles for various reactions that happen, photosynthesis would have two. Okay, so the two main named stages is the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. Now, in order to understand photosynthesis, we think of plants. Okay, so plants photosynthesize, but where inside of these plants does it happen? So if we go back to our unit when we looked at the different types of plant cells versus animal cells and the different organelles that are inside each cell, if we look at humans, cellular respiration occurs inside of our mitochondria within our cells. The organelle that's found in plants only, called a chloroplast, is where photosynthesis happens. So the chloroplast houses the molecule that helps make plants green. Okay, and so they are photosynthesis factories of plants. And whereas mitochondria are the cellular respiration factories for humans or for other organisms. So like mitochondria, they contain their own DNA and ribosomes, and they're able to replicate themselves through a process called fission. So here is one chloroplast blown up and zoomed in just like we looked at the mitochondria. And so what I'm going to point out to you, there's an inner and an outer membrane, just like we had with the mitochondria. And the very, very central area, kind of like the cytoplasm of our cell, it's called the stroma, right? It's aqueous fluid that sort of fills up the rest of the chloroplast. And then we've got these small little stacks of what we call thylakoids. So one of these green things here is called a thylakoid. They stack on top of each other kind of like pancakes. And when you look at an entire stack, the word granum is used. So one of these is called a thylakoid. One stack of these is called a granum. Okay, and then you've got inside of the a thylakoid, you've got something called the lumen, and that's kind of like the cytoplasm of that small substance, so the inner space of the thylakoids. And then each of these stacks is connected by something called the lamella. So you should know the different parts of the chloroplast, and if I were to give you a definition of what the part makes up, you should be able to answer it. That a thylakoid is just one of the I guess they call them stacks of coins, kind of like coin-shaped, round, flat pancake things. Thylakoid would represent the term for just one, and granum would represent an entire stack. They're connected through lamellae, and the inside of one is called our lumen. The inside of the entire chloroplast is called our stroma. Okay? So chlorophyll. So within the chloroplast, there's something called chlorophyll, and it's in the thylakoid membrane. So basically the membrane that surrounds the interior of the thylakoid, you're going to find these small little molecules called chlorophyll. And they are what absorb the light, a light-absorbing green-colored pigment that begins photosynthesis. And there's two types. There's chlorophyll A and there's chlorophyll B. And basically they were just given their different names based on the type of light that they absorb and reflect. And then one more important molecule is called porphyrin. It's the light-absorbing portion of the chlorophyll molecule. If you look in your textbook on page 139, I'm just going to have a look at that so I can help describe it as well. Yeah, page 139 gives you a nice big picture of the molecular structure of a chlorophyll molecule. It's a ridiculously long and intense type of structure that you do not need to memorize, but what you just need to know is that the porphyrin ring at the very top of this long chain is what absorbs the light. It's the light absorbing portion of the molecule. Okay, so now we're going to look at a sort of a quick overview of photosynthesis and just some of the main features. So, a chloroplast. So if this were one chloroplast that we're looking at the inside of, what we're going to do is we're going to break down where the main reactions happen. So inside of our chloroplast, we've got here are thylakoids. So this would represent one granum. Okay, and inside our thylakoid is where the light reactions occur. So here are the light reactions occur here. Let's make that a different color so that it stands out. If we can do this easily. No, we can't do this easily. Maybe let's see here. Okay, there we go. The light reactions. So the light reactions occur in the thylakoid, and out here. Now, if we go back to the overall equation that we talked about at the very beginning of this unit, what's the overall equation of photosynthesis start? What are some of your starting materials? So these would represent these big arrows coming in and going out. So if we think of one thing that plants need in order to photosynthesize, that would be water. So we have to have water coming in. And what's one of the waste products that we have coming out for a plant is oxygen. So remember, the process of photosynthesis uses up carbon dioxide but gives off oxygen. So that must mean that this over here is carbon dioxide coming in. So if you think about our overall chemical reaction, we're represented fairly well here. One of the incoming reactants is water, and another incoming reactant is carbon dioxide. So these are just coming from the atmosphere or outside of the plant cell. And one of our products is oxygen that it produces. And you're going to see that the other product is simple sugar. So let's say glucose. So there are four representatives of our reactants and products of our overall reaction. Now what happens? So we have water coming in, and during the light reactions we have oxygen being split. And we have some things being converted between. So the light reactions happen over here in the thylakoid, and then we have something else happening over here in the stroma of our chloroplast, and that's the Calvin cycle, named after a scientist. Okay, and so what else do we need to know? What cycles between these two? I guess we could say, just to represent those energy carriers that we talked about, we have NADP and we have ADP plus phosphate. And those that are facilitating some of these energy reactions make up ATP and NADPH. So just like in cellular respiration, we have the conversion of ADP and PI to ATP and back again, and we have the energy carriers who are in redox reactions, so accepting hydrogen or releasing hydrogen, also occurring between these two main stages. So again, the two main stages of photosynthesis are the light reactions and the Calvin cycle, and we end up with glucose being produced, and I'm going to leave that blank. This is all you really need to know for the overall cycles happening. Okay, so the four main reactants and products, here's where the light reactions occur, here's where the Calvin cycle occurs. So the light reactions happen in the thylakoid, Calvin cycle happens in the stroma. So just like we learned with cellular respiration, I want you to focus on the big sort of picture. What are the names of the stages? Where do they occur in our chloroplast? And what are the main things that happen? So we're going to look at each in a little bit more detail right now. Okay, so first thing we're going to start off with is the light reactions. The light reaction of photosynthesis takes place in three sort of main phases. Okay, so this is what I want you to focus on and remember. The first stage is photoexcitation. Photo represents light. Excitation means that we're exciting or giving energy to electrons. And this is exactly what's happening. Photon of light from the sun is captured by the chlorophyll molecule, and it basically excites an electron, and when it becomes excited it starts wobbling and shaking back and forth and within the pigment, and this excited electron is captured by a special molecule called a primary electron acceptor. Okay, so the photon of light gets the electron excited, the electron starts wobbling back and forth, and it basically jumps to a primary electron acceptor because it has so much energy. From there, stage 2 of our light reactions is electron transport. Now you've seen this term before, and it is very, very similar to what happened in our electron transport for cellular respiration. Almost identical. We have our electron, which is shuttled along a series of electron carrier molecules that are embedded in the membrane of the thylakoid. So remember, in cellular respiration, our electron transport system had a bunch of protein carriers that would accept and release electrons along, so shuttle it along just like a baton in a relay race. And it also happened in the membrane of our mitochondria. Okay, so it's exactly the same. The final electron carrier is connected to a proton pumping channel that transports hydrogen ions across the membrane. So if you recall, in our electron transport system, we had a bunch of proteins basically embedded in the membrane. And each time an electron came and left, it would help pump hydrogen ions to the other side of the membrane. We created a big concentration of a whole bunch of hydrogen ions on one side of the membrane, and that created a concentration gradient, both an electrical one and a chemical one, which was called chemiosmosis. And what that did was it forced hydrogen ions back through a complex called ATP synthase. The exact same thing happens here in the light reactions. The exact same thing, and I'm going to show you a picture in a minute. Or there's a video that's going to walk you through this. So the third thing that's happening is chemiosmosis, just exactly like we had in the electron transport system. Electro and chemical gradient is caused, which drives hydrogen ions back through ATP synthase, and we end up creating some ATP from that. Okay, so now I'm just going to have you watch a video that basically goes through and shows you a visual of everything that I just showed you, and it basically goes through each of the stages of what I just described, but it gives you a visual to watch. So have a look at that and make any notes that you need to during the video to kind of sum up what you've got. But this is also all in your textbook on page 147. So if this is something you feel like you want a little bit more reading on, Feel free to consult your textbook, but remember, your textbook's going to give you a lot more information than you need, and I really just want you to focus on anything that I've gotten here in the notes in terms of what you should remember. So this starts on page 147 in your text for any extra additional information if you want.